Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of CES, and thank you for joining our session.
And I think that for faculty, like I say, I always start with, please just type in your prompts. And then they'll start to learn how they can ask further questions. I've seen some really interesting, some teachers are using it for learning how to fact check, which is a skill we're all going to need to continue to improve in terms of the media. And so they'll use it as an assignment where the whole assignment is written by ChatGPT, and then the students themselves have to do a fact check on it. And that is using different tools of inquiry. I've seen one where the ChatGPT wrote the entire essay and the teacher says, grade this based on tone. Well, how would you rate this? And so then the student becomes the grader, and it becomes like peer editing, which we know is very valuable in teaching and learning. So I'm hoping that in the next year, probably less, that we have more kind of circles of best practices of how to use these tools to learn them. But it's still early, and I think it's going a little slower than I had thought.
I want to stop 1 second and welcome to the stage Daniela Braga, our last panelist. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Quick intro for the audience for you, and then I'll come back to John and reframe for his question. Yeah.
I'm Daniela Braga, founder and CEO of Defined.AI. We are the largest marketplace of training data for AI, ethically sourced. And it's really, our scope is in the Gen AI space. We carry unstructured data mostly, anything from speech, text, image, video, music, code, audio. And so all these, and the multimodal interfaces now that we're dealing with. So I have a background in academia. I started there. Then I went to a big corporation, Microsoft. And then I started Define.AI with the goal to, all AI starts in data, basically. So with the goal of making sure that the big builders of Gen AI are using the right, the paid for, consented, non-scraped content having the copyrights, the content creators copyrights assured. So that's what we've been doing.
Well, we saved the really hard questions around ethical and responsible use of AI until you got here. We're going to get to those. So we'll be ready for that. But John, I want to frame the question we were on a little differently now for you. So you're back in the academy. You're talking to the 53% of the faculty members who have not tried to engage with this new tool now available that many of their students are already using. How do you start the conversation with them, and in an encouraging way, because we know we need to use carrots with faculty members, get them to start the journey that we know everyone needs to go down?
Well, I think one of the challenges dealing with faculty is that they think they really know everything because they got their PhD. So trying to get them to do some new tricks is sometimes hard to do. Typically, faculty members got introduced when the campus decided that they would license your tool, and they would attach it to the academic honesty statement and the syllabus, and then faculty members could decide what they wanted to do. So you had some faculty members who every student had to run their paper for checking before they turned it in, to other faculty members just ignored it. I think what's happening now, and you alluded to it with AI, as it's included here, is that dialogue. As a faculty member in our programs, we are trying to help students become professionals and get their professional voice. And we want it to be their voice. But how do they grow to be a professional? Well, they need to interact with people that are in the profession. They can't always do it. So your little model of where you would ask a question and it would answer it back, they're beginning to get that level of conversation that they would maybe not have when they were in their study group with just students talking with each other. To get faculty to do more with this is for them to see how it improves their students' work, because that's a goal, and then reduce the load. And the biggest challenge, it used to be, I'm a gray beard, I'm old enough that you pulled out the red pencil, edited all that, and tried to make sure the students didn't cry when they opened up the paper and it was full of red. Now we're getting where we don't need to deal with little grammar and smaller things because those things are corrected. We're really thinking about what is the content, what is the message, what is the information. And so it reduces the cognitive load for the faculty member, but it reduces the load for the students so they could focus on the information you're trying to convey rather than sort of the grammar, or I don't know how to start this paragraph. One assignment that a colleague did is that we were playing with a set of his papers. He put them through ChatGPT, and we graded the papers. And ChatGPT was about a C+, B-. And so his assignment was he took a C- auto-generated paper and told the students, turn this into an A-level paper. And that was much more of the experience that he wanted the students for critical thinking than they had written in the paper on their own.
Okay. I mean, I'll just share how we're thinking. Now we're just thinking about how we're doing it in university, right? So actually, today we're announcing our first supported AI service, which is kind of a curated ChatGPT for our community. But it's not just rolling out tools, it's rolling out the scaffolding and support around the tools. So the faculty members who have been thinking about it, but maybe not knowing where to get started, they have a resource center to go tap into for being able to say, here's how you can incorporate it, here's how some of your colleagues have started to incorporate it. Staff members are using it to figure out how to drive better productivity in their work environments. The researchers are already using this to a certain extent, right? But they're now starting to use this with more unstructured data, to Daniela's point, and we'd like to be able to inform them and talk to them about the right types of data sets to use, the right types of sources to use. So we've thought about it as being a very, very kind of broad platform-based set of services, not just tools, but services to support the organization, because we want to accelerate its adoption across our enterprise. I want to come to
I want to follow up on that because when this first came out, I was like, well, what should I do? So my research area has been in electronic portfolios. I did work for EDUCAUSE. So I asked the question of ChatGPT, what are electronic portfolios? What are they used for? What's the current trends? And a nice answer, and I was really happy because I did a white paper for EDUCAUSE and we did a definition of electronic portfolios that got accepted in the field. So it had that definition. It had some examples of various places. I said, this is really good. ChatGPT has it, or whatever the initials, I'm dyslexic. Anyway, so then I said, and who are the leaders in this field? And it came back and it named my two authors and not me. So I said, this is terrible. How could it be so stupid? But I think that's the challenge. When the campuses imposed this in the syllabus, it was an added burden to the professors for something they needed to learn. So if you could get the professors seeing the value in using it, then they'll start incorporating it in their teaching. Teaching is one part of it. The next is research. And we know that that's a core, like UNR1 research institution. So I think we're going to see more faculty using it if they start seeing the value in their day job in addition to their job of teaching students and helping them develop in their field.
Yeah. I want to talk about the research part of academia. And Daniela, you brought this up in our call, and you have a unique perspective, having been in the academy for part of your career, and then in big tech, and now in kind of small entrepreneurial startup. We were talking about how for the first time, usually the role of academia is we're on the cutting edge of driving the field of discovery, right? But in this kind of age of knowledge driven by AI, big tech, right, in the tech industry have the capabilities and the resources that no university or faculty member could have. So when we think about that change in dynamic and what it means for PhD students who are working in the academy and their progression, wanting to stay in the academic field, how is this disrupting how we need to think about what academia's role is in the future with respect to technology development and innovation?
Yeah, in our call, what I said was academia used to be the forefront of innovation, and in the AI world we live in, it's no longer academia because it's just impossible to keep up with the level of resources that these technologies require, right? So you need amounts of data and cloud computing that were unimaginable 10 years ago, and who can afford that? It's definitely not academia in no part of the world. So that's what I said. There was a kind of a ironic change of dynamics that academia became less innovative, but then at the same time, industry still requires the flow of talent coming from academia, and how can academia keep up with that? So yeah, I think where academia can make today what I see across the industry is academia making benchmarks across all the foundational models that are happening now. So everybody's bringing their own, mostly trained on the same data, which is why most of them perform the same way. ChatGPT seems to be got ahead in usability and democratization ahead of any other, actually, ahead of TikTok. In any point in time, there was no innovation no application that got so quickly adopted in the world. But what I see academia doing, because they are the independent observers, is comparing and bringing frameworks to compare foundational models, bringing new features again, gaps that you see here and there, bringing test sets that are very well curated and that become the benchmark for every single aspect of it. I mean, I highly encourage, for example, to read the Gemini report, the Google Gemini report, which is that's a Gemini own report, obviously. But that being said, the academic angle of looking at, okay, what is the best performing model for interfaces between Java and Python, or because this is what's happening now. You're starting to see translation of programming languages between not just languages but programming languages. What is the best performing in STEM, or in actually college degree math, and so this is where academia can come and say, from an independent perspective, this is the best tool for this domain, and instead of the companies that are actually ruling and running that part of or developing the models themselves.
John, any perspective on if you were talking to someone who wanted to build their career in academia, what your advice would be today?
Well, yes. I think the reason I was chosen is that I'm a emeritus professor, so I could say anything I want at this point. But in preparation for this, because I was going public, I checked all the quotation marks in my thesis. Sorry about that. We won't get political. But the comment that you had in terms of what libraries and universities, so pre-internet, university libraries were the key. And you would have to go to a certain library to get the original works or those materials. And you knew which library you went to, whether it was Oxford, Harvard, MIT. We'll do Irvine too. Then the internet came, and then we had interlibrary loan that you could mail it, but then you could get a copy of it, and you could get it, but you were still getting the text that you would read it. Now, essentially, we have sucked up all this data. You don't have to go to a library, and it's not just giving me a copy of the paper, but it's actually letting me, will you compare this document with that document? So it's becoming this is not the teaching tool, but the research tool for faculty members. Again, a personal experience, I was writing a letter to a colleague about a problem we were working on, and he sent me a note back saying, I'm not important enough for you to spend the time to write a good letter. He said, at least put it through ChatGPT for me. So I did that. It sort of surprised me. I said, it helped organize my thoughts around this problem better than because I was sleepy, had it up the next morning. Then I started sending everything through it to him, and he said, will you finally talk to me again? But I think the change from where there were limited resources, you had to go to the material, to then you could get the material, but you had to process it. Now we have this activity where not only the material, but its content and its ability to be interacted with. And in the simplest form, you were talking about programming languages. All my friends who are doing programming, whether it's a JavaScript or they're trying to put an iPad application, they put the problem into that, and they go, it's not perfect, but it's a 10-minute fix rather than a 4-hour fix. And that, to me, is probably the most exciting thing about what's happening with AI in the academy now.
Yeah, I tell people who haven't really deeply engaged, I'm like, look, you can turn on a plugin in your Google, your Google search to run alongside your Google search, and basically a generative AI summary. And I said, just do it so you could see what it generates, right? Because the Google search gives you all of the links, and then you decided which links, and you go in and you read, and then you summarize through your brain. Now, have that run alongside your Google search, right? For all those people who think that Google search is going to become a outdated, basically legacy technology, people should see what that looks like. And I actually have it day in, day out now, where when I open, for a Google search, it gives me both. And then I figure out which one I want to utilize in the tool. So that's just my own personal hack. Let's start talking about, a lot of conversation, and it's not just in the industry of education or academia, but responsible and ethical use of AI. Daniela, you've started a company really trying to help people understand, you said it earlier, AI really starts with data, right? What was the genesis behind the company, and then what are you trying to accomplish in terms of bringing better practices out to the world, whether it be in education or any other industry?
And precisely, and that is also what academia can do, because academia is independent, and it should keep fostering the critical thinking on students to really question what are we consuming, right? So gets back to your question, Tom. Because all AI starts in data, and Gen AI and AI in the last decade really went from rule-based to data-driven to big data-driven. It started a Wild West trend of amassing and searching for data everywhere it is, which is the internet. And really disregarding the consent problem, the copyrights problem, the asking for the paying for the data concept, the questioning whether the data is representative or it's basically unbiased if the data is unbiased. Questioning even beyond the surface of consumption, when there is humans in the loop, reinforcement learning with humans in the loop, who's behind the scenes? Who are we paying fairly the people behind the scenes? And so what we started seeing I started the company in 2015. That was it was still a moment where, we were seeing the demand of data, we were seeing, and the premise originally was really unbiased representation, high quality, and scale. But then it became very obvious that because it was unsaid, there were a number of moral rules, because it's only legal until there's a regulation, right? There were a number of moral standards that were being broken here, which is all the things I said. And so our marketplace has kicked off. Initially started we source data from contributors. We always went on the fair wages, on the right skills, and paying for the skills and for the time that people spend on it, the transparency, the anonymization of the users. We never exposed the identity of the contributors to the clients and vice versa. All of those things which are unsaid, right? But people the problem is what we see in the market is companies that are selling to big corporations document IDs from the US and European citizens with no consent, obviously. Medical records from all over the world with no consent. And this is the selling part. Now, the part that the content creation world out there, the content from news articles and journalists, from creators, from artists, from musicians. Who is talking about that part? So yeah, so we have a whole other line besides the contributors that are more tasked to perform a certain data collection for us or annotation task, and that itself has to have a unbiased by design framework for every data set and all that transparency and encryption of the data and so on. There's the partner data, real world data of content creators and companies that are not in the AI business, but are sitting on tons of data that one day or sooner or later will be either leaked or scraped. And we are protecting and licensing commercially and making that data machine learning ready and having the partner walk through the legal piece of making that data consented, legal, auditable. Now, this only makes sense when there's a certification, where before that, when there's regulation towards certification. But that's how and academia has a critical point to help students to understand which models are we using. GPT was not born well, in that sense, morally well. ChatGPT was not morally, did not grow under those premises of being responsible. Others did. So how about we check all the other 300 foundational models that are out there and see the nutrition label that is in there.
Annie, when you talk to your customers about responsible ethical AI, tell us a little about how that conversations goes, where your customers ask questions, types of advice you give them.
Yeah, and the key for us is about transparency, because I don't think you cannot tell somebody exactly how your AI works. You can tell it how the data sources that are in the model, how you generally train the model, but why it made a decision about this is not something that you're able to do. So there's this element of like how many can we be transparent to make people feel that they understand how we build ours, but also how to be literate in having conversations about AI, not just ours, but with others, and privacy and copyright that goes into that. So the way we have the conversation is very much when they ask, I'll approach it from when they ask about our model, like the model that we use to detect AI writing. Like, how do you know? How do you, as Turnitin, feel confident that this is AI writing to tell the teacher that it's, in the assignment? And generative AI writing, specifically ChatGPT 3.5, has some pretty statistical significant indicators that let us know, and we use 25 years of academic writing as our model to know the differences between, okay, here's the model that is AI writing, and we can get that infinitely through our, sources, and then we have, this is a whole bunch of student writing, and we can tell the difference between them. So for us, we make sure that we are including underrepresented minority groups in our model. So we're not just thinking about, okay, well, this is the population, and so smaller groups aren't represented. So we make sure, for instance, to have a statistical significance around HBCU data, as an example. We also even did a follow-up recently. There was an article published, or a study by Stanford, saying that AI writing detection is biased against English language learners. So those who don't write or speak English as their first language. And we did a second test just to make sure. For us, it's also about safety. So we specifically dove into that topic and got extra work to test ours, and it wasn't no statistical significance because we included English language learning in our data model. So we knew that that was part of it. And that study, by the way, it used samples of less than 300 words. So that's one thing that we do, is if it's less than 300 words, it's very hard to statistically say that something is or is not written by AI. It's not as definitive. So we have, so we automatically tell them, we're not going to give you an indication on this. It's not enough words. So things like that are how we try to explain and work with institutions on safe and ethical. We also are very cognizant of false positive rates in terms of when we have an AI writing indicator, it's less than 1%, and people ask, well, how do you know that? How do you get that? And the way we do it is you can make something less effective, right? There's two knobs. So to have a low positive rate, you make something a little less effective to keep that. So we'd rather let 15% on average, we'd rather miss 15% of AI writing to make sure that we are safe and keep it a 1% false positive. So those are how we talk about it with institutions, depending how technical they are. And you all know, when you're talking to faculty or institutions, the knowledge of AI and what level to speak to them at differs. And so we really have to know, there's researchers who will want to know, really get into how we created and test the model, and there's others who are just looking for a high level of, what does AI do? So we're always trying to meet them where they are in that question.
Yeah. Okay, so final question for us today. I asked you to play prognosticator. I was joking with a few of the panelists earlier. It's like, imagine interviewing a candidate today and them saying to you, it's like, well, I've heard of the internet. I got some friends that use it, but I've actually never used it myself. Is it a requirement for the job? Right? Some of us are old enough that we might remember days when not everyone had access to the internet and thought of it as just a part of how you go about your day. AI is likely going to be that way. Right, and so I'm drawing from a specific experience. So every year we run a conference at our university around digital transformation. We have cross-industry conference. This year they wanted to talk about AI. Imagine that. It happened in November. And it was interesting. Everyone was talking about their AI journeys, where they were doing, what they were using it for, their use cases. And everyone brought up change management. And also they used this term, AI literacy. We need to build AI literacy across our organization, which is how do you get every person in the organization to think of it as a tool and figure out how they should be using it. Now, to my esteemed panelists here, we're going 10 years out. AI is now pervasive everywhere. What does AI literacy mean? And how would you talk to an organizational leader, whether it's an institution or a for-profit organization, about building AI literacy? John, we're going to start with you.
Well, I'll start with, back at the beginning of the internet and the personal computer, this little thing called an Apple or a Commodore. And there was a big movement towards computer literacy. And computer literacy at that time was defined as learning basic. Print 10, hello, hello, hello. I worked for the firm called Designware. We did some work for a number of computer companies where we developed a computer literacy course, and only one part of it dealt with programming, and we didn't use a programming language. We talked about the concepts of programming. The other 3 chapters were its practical implications, how was it being used, and another one was the effects on society. We look at the automobile, replacing horseless carriages, but that's not what the change was. It wasn't just being a car replacing the horse. It came up with, changed the way we build houses. You no longer had porches because you drove the people, you didn't walk down the street. It changed dating practices. You no longer had to find a place to make out, you had your own car. And it turned LA into a parking lot. And Joni Mitchell, I think is the song. Anyway, so I think we're in this stage now where we're talking about internet literacy like teaching basic. We're talking about AI as we touch the elephant now. But what AI will be in 10 years is going to be very different than what we're talking about it now. And I think the point that you made was that AI's been around. It's been around for a long time. We sort of let a half-baked AI cake come out, and everybody thinks that's what it is. But we have been impacted by AI every time you bought something on Amazon, every time you checked something on Facebook. Now we're just seeing it happening. And I think we will be surprised what it looks like 10 years from now. But I don't know any way to figure out what it is. If I did, I would be investing in various companies. I should talk to you after this.
Yeah. Annie, how about you?
Yeah, I think, I don't know the answer, which is not shocking, but I'll talk about some barriers that I think that we'll need to break down along the way, which is cost and equity of access are the 2 costs I see as the barriers, especially in education, to get through. And we talk about it because ChatGPT 3.5 is free. If you're a company and you want to include an LLM into your product, you can't. It's too expensive. And you're lucky. I know you're CIO and you have a great server base, so you've done some really innovative things and have the resources to build some tools off of LLMs, but it's very expensive, and it's very expensive for individuals than to use it. And so I think we'll have to figure out how we make sure it's in the hands of every student, not just the students who can afford it. It's going to be important, as well as making it how do we figure out the business models that will be durable, not just like, oh, this is great fun for this week, this is the tool of the week, but creating that durability. Those are the two factors to get through.
Danielle.
No, we're over time. I'm going to try to be brief. I hope I'm an optimistic. In 10 years, all the problems of responsible AI, ethics and AI should be gone. We should have solved them. I am hoping, right? But I see a very steep, very uphill road in the next 5. Let's look at the next 5 and not next 10 to get all the world on the same page on the data part and all that I've just said. And we just launched our data manifesto, our AI manifesto. So on our website or on our press release, you can find us, Defined.AI. It's there. That's one part of it. But there's also the application usage and the level of involvement of people in the loop to make the final decisions. There are applications that should never be fully decided by AI. Those related to human resources and job decision and hiring. Those related to health and life and death decisions, and financial decisions. So those are some of the, not to mention warfare decisions. All of those aspects should never be completely run by an AI alone. So we gotta keep thinking. I know ethics sounds very philosophical and not a completely different discipline from this AI tech thing, but we need to bring those disciplines together to cross this bridge.
Thank you. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our panelists for today.